Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the Ski Instructor Podcast. My name is Dave Burrows and I'm the director and owner of SnowPros Ski School based here in the Valais in Switzerland. This week I'm joined by Ed Drake, former Great Britain downhill skier and Olympian. Ed also runs an absolutely brilliant podcast called the Ski Racing Podcast, which follows the Alpine World Cup season during the winter, and he's also as summer is here and lots of people are available and not in sort of training blogs. He's got some amazing interviews on which I think coming up over the summer as well. So very much looking forward to listening to those. But Ed has been on my hit list as a guy to interview for a long time. I've been looking really to, or you'll find out during the podcast, but I've been really looking to get his insights on being coached, his thoughts on being coached, and as an athlete, and how that relates also to how he does some coaching himself these days as well. In this first half, we're mainly talking about Ed's ski racing career, which goes on for quite a long time. There's a lot in it, and there's a lot of detail involved, and there's also a especially poignant bit, I think, which talks about what happens to those ski racers or athletes in general when they come to the end or of their career, or they drop out of programs that they might be in. So that's what we're looking at in the first half here, and enjoy this half, and I'll catch you in the middle somewhere. Welcome to the Ski Instructor Podcast. Ed Drake, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, managing to stay healthy.
Oh, well, that's good. That's really, really good. I'll put my cards on the table. I'm a big fan of the Ski Racing Podcast.
Oh, thanks, mate.
It's fantastic, and it's essential listening if you're following the World Cup, or the shortened World Cup this season. So, I want to. Hopefully, we'll come to talking about that a little bit later. But what I really wanted to do at the start was to kind of get a handle on your sort of skiing career.
Mm-hmm.
Where you came from, where you came out of, and where it took you. So I don't know, maybe if you can give us that as a sort of potted history, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, well, I just sort of fell into racing really, sort of by accident, really. My parents are keen skiers. My dad skied from when he was young. My mum only learnt when she was 30 odd, but it was addicted. And so we started going on ski holidays from as young as I can remember. I learned to ski when I was about 3. And then just sort of, fell in love with it. I've got an older brother and a younger sister, and as any siblings are, they're always chasing their older siblings. And my brother started going off skiing, and I was stuck in creche. And apparently, I said that I wanted to ski, not do creche. And Mum said, "Well, when you can ski, you can go." And so apparently, from then on, I was, strapped into plastic skis with my shoes, on, trying to catch up my brother. And so that was sort of my skiing to start with, was from a very young age. But racing, sort of, Mum wasn't sure what to do with us on an inset day, and she took me and my older brother, because my sister was too young, to Hillingdon dry ski slope on an inset day. And me and my brother were just skiing up and down, and there was a guy there, and he just said, your kids look like they can ski, do you want to join the race club? And that was it. Huh? And that was an expensive conversation for my parents. That was an expensive inset day.
Yeah, it's funny how they lure you in, isn't it? It's just a chance conversation.
Absolutely. But then, so I then did stuff back home with Kandahar, Hillingdon dry ski slope, and then, but sort of racing, I then did on snow as well. We used to go to Morzine every year.
Okay.
And that was where I got my sort of love affair with. When I became a little bit older and able to grasp it, that's the place where my nostalgia takes me to go skiing. People always ask, "Where's your favourite place to go skiing?" And I always end up with about 5 different answers, and but it depends on in what context you mean. In terms of my love of skiing and where I feel most at home and have the best memories, it's got to be Morzine, because that's my childhood, that's growing up.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I did a few races for the resort. So there was a competition called the Twelder Ski. But yeah, That is what it's called. I can't remember now. It's been too long. I think that's what it's called. And it's a lowlanders race. So you mostly it's populated by French. That you're just not allowed to live in ski resorts. So most it's Parisians and dotted around here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I went and raced for the resort, and it took me a couple of goes, but I won this the Étoile d'Or. That's what it's called, the Étoile d'Or. And I won my weight in Orangina, but it wasn't. I mean, I was like 11, so then I weighed nothing. So, but you stood on the scales with like the local mayor, and who happened to be a fairly sizable bloke. And they basically, you stood on these scales and they stuck crates of Orangina on the other side, proper huge, great big scale. And then they had this, the mayor came on, and obviously it took a few more crates of Orangina. I ended up winning 47 crates of Orangina.
No.
Yeah. And my parents were like, what on earth are we going to do? We can't take all of this away. And so we sent half of it back with the ESF guy that came with me that sort of looks after you when you're at these races representing the resort, and the rest of it he took back to the ESF and dished it out amongst those guys. So
amazing.
That was, this crazy little thing. It was all sponsored by Rolls and Muir. You just get kit out. Brilliant race. I mean, it was mega fun. It was sort of a head-to-head style knockout thing. Okay. It was wicked, absolutely wicked.
They still do those in resort, don't they? Like in half term, I'm sure they do. What is it called? The Flesh and the something else. One's a slalom, one's a GS.
So those are all the ones that are, I believe, anyway, if it's the same as what it used to be, that are like the resort run races. But these were across the whole of the French Alps. So I was there representing Morzine, and there'd be people there. I remember there was another British guy, a guy called Freddie Clough, who the Cloughs, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. No. They are out of Marybelle. Tony Clough is the dad, and he owns is it in Ski Into the Blue or Blue, something like that, holiday chalet company.
Okay.
And the Cloughs, and Freddie's the same age as me, so we used to go and race, and he would be racing for Marybelle, and then there'd be kids from Orsières and Morges, from Morzine and Courchevel, and dotted all around the Alps. But it was great fun. But yes, that was my early racing, and then all of a sudden I was hooked on racing, and had my sights set on going to the Olympics from when I was 6 years old. Apparently,
really,
So I was, like I said, I used to ski with Kandahar.
Yeah.
And Shirley Stevens, who used to run Kandahar at the time, and who I'm still in contact with, she asked me, apparently, not that I can remember, what I wanted to do with skiing, and apparently I turned around and said I wanted to go to the Olympics, and that was age 6, and that was that.
Amazing.
And so followed my dream, went on the England team, was British children's team. They went on the England team when I was part-time, and then as soon as I left college, I went full-time, was part of the British team that took me competing around the world, and World Cup, Olympics, World Champs. Yeah, it's been pretty fun life so far on the ski side.
And when did your switch? So you're known as a downhill kind of guy. You don't like the turns. As anyone who listens to the ski racing podcast will know, you're not into turning that much. Which
wasted energy. It's all it is. Wasted energy.
Well, I'm the polar opposite of you, so I don't like going too fast. So I like to turn, but I think there's a balance to be struck somewhere. But what sent you into the downhill side of it, or did you have to do everything?
Oh, so I was a slalom skier really until I was, I think, 24-ish. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's a different chat, because a lot of the top downhill guys used to be slalom skiers.
Yeah, I think it's because when you're younger and sort of growing up on various teams, wherever you're from, regional teams and the likes, downhill and Super G, they take up so much piste space, and you just don't get the opportunities to train. So the vast majority is giant slalom, because that's still, the sort of the base skill set for any of the alpine disciplines. So you kind of, and I think it's just repetition. So I was a slalom skier. I was ranked 4th for my age in the world in slalom when I was 21.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I was raised, you know, I remember one of my last FIS slaloms that I did, I was at a race with Dave riding.
Right.
And I'd scored my best ever slalom result. I scored 20 points, which I was pretty pleased with. It was my lowest discipline at the time.
Uh-huh.
Dave was a few places behind me, which I'd never let him forget, because now he absolutely wiped the floor with me. So I've got to keep a few claims to fame. and so I did that race, scored my best result. The following weekend, the coaches decided that I was going to go and race a Super G, a double Super G, just round the corner. And because I was skiing all disciplines, I was like, yeah, cool with me. And I think I scored about the same points-wise. I can't remember exactly, but from then on, I barely put slalom skis on again, apart from in combined. And I was a speed skier. All of a sudden, gone from one weekend from scoring my best slalom result to the following weekend scoring my best speed result. And that was me.
Is that because someone made that decision for you or pushed you in that direction? Or was that you saying, no, I really, really like going fast and this is where I'm at?
I think at the time, I mean, I've always liked going fast. I've always been about speed from whatever I've been doing. It's always been about going fast. And so, and I've always had this, I don't know what the right word is, just love of watching downhill, you know, the big classics, the Vegans, the Kitzbühels, the sort of, the macho probably isn't the right word, especially not anymore, but you know, the sort of the colossal events, the big ones that people look at in awe and just go, holy crap, how am I going to do that? Yeah. And that's always been a bit of an attraction for me. I'm not sure what that says about me, but and so I think I was a proper all-rounder, did everything, and all of a sudden I just was putting that way. I'm quite a big bloke. I'm nearly 6'4". Right. At the time I was probably only 80 kilos, and because I was still, you know, relatively young, and I found it quite hard to put on bulk as a youngster. You know, even into my early 20s, I really struggled to put on any sort of size. So I don't know. I guess the coaches just looked at me and sort of thought I had a downhiller's build. And at the time, Finley Mickle was skiing really well, and you know, he's a sort of similar height to I am, sort of similar build-ish. Yeah. And it sort of made sense that I then start to look at, you know, becoming a downhiller and having access to, you know, eventually I switched on to the Atomic brand, which Finley was on, which meant that we got to I got to pull Finley's resources, and it sort of gave me access to better kit that I probably would have had on my own. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I guess the coaches ultimately decided, but it wasn't sort of them going, you have to do downhill. It was a case of we just started, I don't know, sort of steering gradually towards that. I doubt it was a full decision in terms of like you are now a downhiller.
Yeah. I wonder though. I wonder. You going back to that issue of build? I think it's always the case. I look back to pictures of myself when I was like 21, and everyone's skinny when they're 21. Like, but I wonder, because a lot of the guys who are well, I don't know, is that right? I was about to say a lot of the guys who are really doing it in downhill now are slightly older guys, aren't they? And I guess it's easy to put on that maths. Yeah, some of the guys who are at the top are really big now.
Yeah, I think downhill. I mean, it's a generalisation, and obviously there are exceptions to those generalisations. But I think ultimately most downhillers are big dudes and have that sort of dad strength, even though not many of them are dads. But you know what I mean? That sort of strength that you get from just doing the same thing over and over again. And also speed races, downhills. And obviously Super G's off the back of that, because you ski on the same hills. It's all about learning the tracks and experience. And I think that's one of the things that means that you peak so much later, because in a downhill, it's all about terrain. Whereas obviously slalom and giant slalom slalom is probably the one that matters least if you look at the whole thing as a spectrum, in my opinion, that what's happening, you know, in terms of what the piste is doing has less of an effect on the outcome of the race as opposed to the course set. If you see what I mean.
Would it be? Yeah, okay. No, I see what you mean. And a lot of is it right to say that a lot of those downhill guys, they're not training so much for agility, I guess. It would be pure strength and then experience of track is what counts for those guys.
Yeah, I think it's still ultimately the speed races obviously are longer in terms of time and distance. But at no point is it anything other than a sprint. You don't push out the start gate of Wengen looking to hold back some energy for the bottom. It's still a sprint from top to bottom. So a lot of it is like muscular endurance and having the power to be able to turn massive, stiff skis on bulletproof ice that's harder than concrete.
Yeah.
Doing speeds of 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, best part of.
Yeah. And I think macho probably is the right word, even though it seems to have disappeared from some of the usage of language, or has apparently become a toxic word. But you can't get away from the fact that is just brutal what those guys are doing. It just is, and you're either brave or you're not brave, right? Macho or you're not macho. It's
I believe so. I mean, I think the macho. The terminology macho obviously sounds like you're talking about a bloke, but I think it's applicable from ladies to the men. You're being macho, whether it's right, but basically you're just being gung ho and looking for speed and sort of not really fussed about the consequences. In reality,
and that's hard to do, I suppose, if you've had a few crashes as well, a few big ones.
Yeah,
as you must have had over the years, is then to just keep pushing out of the gate and keep looking for that speed. That takes real bravery,
Yeah, but I also think it makes your career very black and white, because I think the minute the fear comes, it's done. It's black and white. Once you're standing in a start gate worrying about hurting yourself, then you're out. You may as well pack up and go home.
It's funny that, because I'd noticed a little. Well, I don't know whether it is a correlation, and you've been around that circuit more often than I have, so that you'll know. But I wonder when family comes along for those guys,
yes,
and girls, whether that goes. That sort of not really worried about, and. You can almost predict, I'd say, probably who's going to be leaving the scene.
Jessel Jantra just had a kid. I mean, right now he's sitting in I assume he's in Norway, either that or he's in Innsbruck. But right. He's sitting inside, not putting his life on the line at the moment, and he's got a fresh. But I think. Is she pregnant or is she? I'm not sure. Anyway, he's about to be a dad if he's not already a dad. So all of a sudden, it'll be interesting to see whether he's still got that same psyche. I remember Finley Mickle, who I mentioned already, when he was competing, he just had his son Jensen, and he said that all of a sudden he realised that he didn't want to put himself at risk because he had this family, and he said that was basically his wake up call. That was his time to throw, to throw the towel in, or to retire, however you want to put it. It wasn't a case of him having enough.
Yeah.
In terms of I found the fear, but he's just all of a sudden he's got responsibilities and he's not willing to put himself on the line again.
It's interesting that, isn't it? 'Cause it does change you, despite what It's really strange. You don't know it until you have a kid. But it does change everything. And it's such a cliche to say, and I never thought that I would be that. But I'm 3 years into this now, and things do change, and you start to think about stuff that you've never thought about before. There's a new thing that's gone onto my list that I'm looking at in front of me, like my list of things that I'm trying to do in my life, and one of them says legacy. I never really thought about that before, but now there's sort of someone coming behind you now. That responsibility that comes with it is it hangs heavy, I think, if you think about these things.
Yeah, and ultimately, the ski racing it's dangerous. There's no getting away from it. It's not, it's not sprinting. It's not playing football. You do put your life on the line. I remember this. There was a fascinating documentary, and it's on YouTube. I can't remember the name of it, but it's the BBC did it. It's with Michael Johnson.
Right.
and they put it out just before the Vancouver Olympics, in the build-up to Vancouver Olympics, I think it was. And my now wife, but my girlfriend at the time, she watched it and sort of not really knowing what I did that well, watched this documentary and all of a sudden was a bit nervous for what I was about to do. But he talks about, it's brilliant. You should watch it if you haven't seen it. It's brilliant.
I'll hunt it down. Yeah.
But it's he goes to watch the World Championships on the Fasta Belvard in Val d'Isère. I was racing at it, and he was trying to watch on inspection. He was trying to stand do inspection basically, and he's I think it's probably fair to say a very intermediate skier at best. And he's just sweating profusely, trying to talk to camera, trying to hold his balance on the fan, on an injected piece, and just having an absolute nightmare. It's trying to get into the psyche of a downhiller. Yeah. But one of the sort of lines that sort of stuck with me, having seen it, this documentary, was that downhillers, well, skiers in general, but more specifically downhillers, put their life on the line every time they push out the start gate. He said the worst thing that could happen to me is I could tear my hamstring.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, I don't know, it's a bit weird because you kind of, I don't know, you get that, it's like a little ego boost that somebody thinks you're a bit crazy doing something. But at the same time, it's like, that's not why you do it, but you kind of like that people think that you maybe have a screw loose.
You're a little bit out there. It's funny, we were. I don't want to mention this on every episode, so I'm sorry, listener, but we were chatting motorbikes before, and you do get that sensation actually when you're out on your bike, don't you? You pull up, next to a bunch of cars, and you see the people in their little boxes, and you're the guy like on a bike with a helmet, and you're in the you're in the open.
Yeah.
Like you're different. You're different to everybody else.
Yeah.
It's nice that. I had 2 points to make. It just came out of your thing. One, I saw Jansrud once. I went to Norway at the end of the season with a mate of mine just for a ski, to go and ski somewhere different. And I saw Jansrud. In fact, the whole Norwegian team were there. So I saw Svindal, and he was like the big man at the time. I saw Jansrud, and I could not believe the size of that guy. He's built like...
They're monsters.
He's absolutely enormous. I've never seen a guy so big. Absolutely incredible. And secondly, the Fasta Belvard, I can see why Michael Johnson would have been freaked out on that. I mean, I was doing my Basie 4 on that, and then we do short turns down the Fast. It's reasonably steep. I mean, it's not it's steep. It's not steep, but I wouldn't want to have to try and do it on ice injection. That would be a whole different world.
I think the Fast. There's a few racetracks around the world where the winner is the person that survives with the fewest mistakes, and the FAS is certainly one of those. It's not necessarily about who's quickest, it's about who can make the least mistakes down something that's pretty gnarly, and the FAS definitely fits that bill.
Yeah, it felt a bit like that when I was trying to do my short turns down there. Luckily it didn't make us do long turns down there. I would have been really crapping myself. And they would have found the limits of my speed for sure. All right, cool. So what can we... Let's jump from the end, from the downhill bit of your... No, we didn't. We missed a bit. So your racing career has culminated in you realising that dream, which is going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
Just to Vancouver, or where there was other ones?
No, I just went to Vancouver. I'd switched to ski cross in 2013 due to... I had a couple of injuries. I sort of fell out with the federation a little bit, and switched to ski cross. And I missed going to the Sochi Games by a couple of tenths, which was a pretty tough pill to swallow. But I built my ski racing career on times, on black and white, and ultimately I wasn't quick enough. And it was close, but that's what I like about sport. It's definitive, and for me, I didn't make it. So that was tough, but at the same time, it was what it was. But Vancouver, going to the games, I'm privileged to be in a position to live out part of a dream. Like I said, I always wanted to go to the Olympics. That's always been the pinnacle of my sport, and to be able to go there, pull on my bib, push out the start gate, and that's something I'll be be able to look back on with fond memories forever. It was just mega.
That's great. I mean, it's brilliant. There's not many people in life who get to realise their dream, I don't think. That's one of the things you realise as you get older, is that, there's an awful lot of people going through life who life isn't what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I know often my friend Steve says this sometimes. I go to the Arsenal with him, and there's a lot of people getting really, really angry, at the players, and it's just like screaming, just abuse it. And my mate Steve just looks around and he goes like, "Can you imagine how like disappointed in the rest of his life that guy is? That this is his outlet, that he comes here and he just screams at these guys who don't care." And like it's. I mean, and it's great, right? You get to realise your dream. But what happened? I'm curious to know. I don't want to immediately put an end point after. But what happens after that? So you spend 4 more years like gearing up for Sochi. You don't quite get there.
Yeah.
Like what happens at the end of that dream? And the reason I say that is because I've got a certificate on my wall over here, which sort of gives me the bit to get my own ski school going, which is always one of my big ambitions. But after I got that certificate, that final bit of paper that I needed, I just felt like I fell off a cliff.
It is weird. I mean, I always planned to. I planned for my ski racing career to keep going until I was, into my 30s, especially as a downhill, and there's no reason why I still couldn't be competing today. So it was always something that I was looking at longer term. I got unlucky with a few injuries, but I mean, athletes have injuries. Again, that's part of sport. That's part and parcel of the game. I got unlucky with a couple of injuries, and then when I missed Sochi, I don't know. I kind of fell out of love with skiing.
Okay.
Because I don't know, I'm not really sure exactly why it was. I think it's just because I'd had a bit of a tough run, and I wasn't sure what I wanted in terms of. I wasn't sure if I didn't enjoy skiing anymore, or if I didn't enjoy racing, or what it was in general. And so I went out and skied with James Bennett. I went out and stayed. I think this was just before Sochi.
Well, that's enough to put anyone off of skiing.
Pardon?
It's enough to put anyone off of skiing, going ski with James Bennett.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, James.
I've had too many times skiing with that guy, so I've got thick skin to him. So I went and stayed with him and Craig Robinson, and sort of just went on a skiing trip and stayed with those guys. And I gave myself sort of 4 or 5 days of skiing to try and find out whether it was skiing that I didn't love anymore, or whether it was just racing.
Okay.
And I realised that I just didn't love racing anymore. And the whole finances of British skiing, which I think seemingly are on the turn at the moment, but certainly through my whole career, I funded myself.
Yeah.
And that was through working in the summer, bit of sponsorship, and stuff, and that's how I paid for my racing career. And through my whole career, I was fine with that, and that was because that was what it was. And I didn't mind working harder than everybody else, or not everybody else, but I didn't mind working harder than my racing peers from the other nations, because that was just what it was, and that was what I had to do to be able to ski in a race, and I loved it, so I don't care. But then towards the end of my career, just as the last year or so, I started to resent the fact that I had to work harder than everybody else, and then I knew that was the writing was on the wall. But to your point, where what happened, what you do afterwards, and that was a real struggle. Because my whole life, without going too deep, my whole life had been about skiing, had been about going fast, and that's everything. Every decision I've made since I was 10 years old was about how to be a faster ski racer. And then when that's not your focus anymore, all of a sudden, I was talking to somebody about it the other day, because I'll get onto that in a second. I was talking about it to somebody the other day, and and I liken it. I always liken it to the fact that I'm in a room and somebody's turned out the lights and it's pitch black, and I don't know where I'm going because for my whole life skiing has been my focus. So it's always been directed in one way, and then all of a sudden life after skiing happens and it's pitch black for the first time, and to try and find a direction, try and find where to go and where you sit and what you're good at, apart from not turning. That's something that's tricky, and actually that's something that to my point, which I was speaking to this guy about, I don't think that there's enough of that around for athletes. So that's something that I'm turning my hand to now, because I want to be able to. I don't want any of these racers to be in a position that I was when I retired. Yeah. And the guy I was talking to is a guy called Ed Jackson, who is an ambassador for Restart, Project Restart. It's a rugby charity about what to do when you finish your competitive rugby career. And I feel like that, for me, it was a big distraction what was next. In terms of, even while I was still racing, you get slightly older, you get towards, I was getting towards 30, and ski, what am I going to do when I stop ski racing? Because all my friends have been doing what they're doing after school. They've been doing it since they were in their early 20s, and I've got to do that in my early 30s. And so, and I feel like that's, we kind of get let down a little bit in sport. And people see the glamorous lifestyle, and you hear about these stories, and you look at, your sporting greats. But for every sporting great, there's 100 times that amount of sporting greats, of people that didn't quite make it. But have pumped their whole lives into doing it. And then, and they're asked to do it. But willingly they do it. But they're asked to do it. You need to be coming on every camp. You need to be skiing every single minute of the day over the winter and all that sort of stuff. And by no means do I have any problem with doing that, because I don't at all. But you, all of a sudden, when you're finished with, when you're too slow or too injured or too whatever, and you get left behind, you're kind of, you're really left behind.
And it can cause actually you to really fall out in a big way with the sport. I know a few I want to say kids, but they're young adults now, but the a few people that have been cut from the Swiss pyramid, for example, and the cut-offs are brutal. Cut by by being out by one fist point. And then that's it.
It's
done.
A brutal world. It's brutal world, but it's at the same time, it's a fantastic world. But it's brutal, and it's not all it's not all winning races and glory days, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. But I guess that's why the highs are so high, because all of a sudden you're all of that hard work is still worth it. And that's the thing. When the good times outweigh the bad, that's easy. But when the bad stuff starts to outweigh the good, that's when, again, that's sort of coming to an end. But so that's one of the things I'm quite passionate about now, is trying to work out a way that we can take that burden away somehow from athletes. Even the guys on the team at the moment, Dave is probably the only one of the British team that's been able to make some money out of skiing, and the rest of them are maybe making a little bit, but certainly not something that's going to set them up for future. And I'm sure having something in place behind the scenes is going to make them faster ski racers.
For sure. What does, since we're going down that road, what does it look like then? Is it a sort of, you're putting in place like some sort of support mechanism, or I don't know, what is it, like a charity or something like that?
It's, to be totally honest, it's in its total infancy, and I've been speaking to a few people about how to sort of try and work out how how this looks, and I don't really know how it looks, because ultimately it comes down, like anything, to money, because it just does. You know, somebody's time is worth money. So but I feel like we've got enough people interested in ski racing, British or wherever, that are interested in ski racing, that we can put some sort of mentoring program together. You can certainly summer load those mentoring programs for the athletes, in terms of just having a little safety net of going, you know, when you finish ski racing, there's an internship for you at somewhere that you are interested in, you know, in terms of your future.
Yeah,
you know, whether it's banking or property or I don't know, whatever, being a builder or whatever, whatever you're passionate about, there should be a process to be able to find you a mentor in that area that can guide you.
That's a really, really great idea. It exists in other sports, right? It must exist in football. It must exist in rugby.
Well, this is the thing. That just this charity that this guy Jackson I was talking to the other day, but it's only recently that they've started to try and, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that this has actually started to yield some results, because I think that in the world of people's awareness for mental health, it is heightened. I think that this is, you know, now a legitimate. You can now come to your governing body, whether that's skiing or football or rugby or tennis or whatever, and say, I'm concerned about this, and they can't, and hopefully they don't just tell you to shut up and get on with it. Yeah. Which I'm sure would have happened years ago.
Well, the world's changed a little bit in that respect. There's a lot of awareness of mental health now, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. So your journey then took you into ski cross. Now, you just told me that you were sick to death of it, the racing element. So how come you ended up in there? Was that just
by accident?
A side, a sort of tangent?
Yeah, by accident. So my final year of Alpine, I can't remember what year it was. They seem to blend into one as I get older. But my final year of Alpine racing, I picked up an ankle injury crashing at World Champs.
Right.
That I kind of skied on when it was afterwards, when it wasn't great. And so I always had this niggle through my ankle. And then, so I trained the rest of that summer, all okay. And then I had another little crash towards the end of the summer. My ankle started to give me a bit of jip. And so I then ended up taking quite a lot of the time off over the winter. And I basically got kicked off the team.
Right.
Because I didn't really race over the winter, mostly because I had this ankle injury. I got kicked off the team. Then I got ankle surgery in that summer, post being dropped from the team. And then I realised that I was still hungry. That sort of period of not racing for the year had sort of brought the fire back and going, I'm not done with this yet. But I wasn't really sure how to tackle it, because I was then on my own. I was ranked my points, I was ranked, I don't know, inside the top 100. I think ranked about 70th in the world in Super G. But I was on my own. And so I did a bit of skiing with James Bennett and Craig Robinson, with their, what was JJC and now PDS.
Yeah.
And they helped me out through some of the stuff in the spring, in the autumn, doing some skiing, and I was sort of bouncing around in my car trying to find a race. And I just started to get my speed back, and I was racing. There was a race around the corner from where I podiumed in Europa Cup. The race was in Radstad, so I pitched up in Radstad, ready to race. All excited. Skiing was coming. The ski racing was coming back to me, and the race was cancelled because we got a bucket load of snow, and so the double Super G that I was supposed to be doing was cancelled. So I was then, properly gutted, and I rang Craig up, and I was about to jump in my car to come back to Muzzing. And he was like, look, and this was Craig, I think, just retired or was coming towards the end of his ski cross career that he was doing. He was like, look, there's a ski cross around the corner in Mishev. It's it's tomorrow. It starts tomorrow, I think it was. Why don't you do that? And I was like, yeah, okay, I guess. So I was in my car on my hands free, calling the federation to say, this is my plan. I want to race in this World Cup ski cross. It's tomorrow in Megève. Can I have a FIS license, please? And can you enter me? Thankfully, they said yes. And so I rocked up at Megève, knew nobody, didn't have a coach, didn't have anything, no idea what the hell was going on. I turned up, inspected this World Cup ski cross racetrack, did the training run, scared myself, did the race, crashed in quali, had the biggest grin on my face, and that was it. I was like, this sport is brilliant. and so I quit Alpine, and because I realised that Alpine was the dream of my Alpine career was sort of over, because as a speed skier, you, like I said to you at the beginning, the training opportunities are so few and far between, and therefore any opportunities that you do get, the big teams get them or the teams get them, and if you want to ski with a team, you either need to, come cap in hand and ask them to pity you and let you have a go, or you need to come with some serious money and pay to be able to use the lanes. And I kind of came up against a wall and decided that I didn't want to just fight my way through an Alpine world that I felt didn't want me. And so I would go and do ski cross, where I just finished with a bruised ego, but had a brilliant time, and that was it. And it was like, I think ski cross has reminded me of being a kid racing. Because some of my best memories were being part of the British Ski Academy in Les Houches, finishing training up in Les Houches, and racing all of my mates from the bottom of the race piece to the van. Last person to the van has to do some stupid forfeit, and that's what it was. And it was just that. And that's ski cross. It's skiing down 4 people at the same time, all fighting for a tiny patch of snow and sort of barging each other. And it reminded me of being a kid, and it really sort of reinvigorated my love of skiing again properly.
Now tell me, I see these guys I don't see them in the ski season, but in Saas-Fee in the summer, they always build a ski cross up there.
Yeah.
And I see those boys doing the ski cross. They're all pretty big dudes, and girls as well. And they're on some pretty long skis, I've noticed.
You're on a giant slalom ski, which is like 190 or so.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily the most agile, but you need to try and find a mix between something that's agile but also something that's going to be stable, because you are going, you're not doing downhill speeds, but you're doing 50-60 miles an hour over decent sized jumps.
Well, this is what I'm seeing, and I couldn't believe, because the turning radius on some of those skis is not that tight, is it? And some of the corners on those tracks are pretty tight. Obviously you've got banking there, which I guess helps to a certain degree.
But you also got negative turns as well. So, but the thing is, you've also got to get, you've got to be able to move out of somebody's way, or move into a gap that's just appeared. So you have to muscle your way around. But it's it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, I've got, so in my quiver that I've got in my garage, I've recently gone to a slightly shorter ski, but I have got a pair of 195 35 metre radius, the old big spec guys, the guys were using like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, the old fierce reg,
Then that's not an agile ski at all.
No, 100% not.
It doesn't want to turn. Or if you are trying to carve it, you're going light speed before it does start to work.
Yeah, it takes a bit of speed and a bit of force from you and from gravity to get that ski doing anything that you want it to do.
Yeah, I can't believe you guys are skiing that down a ski cross. I've got to be honest.
But it's stable, so that's half the battle.
Okay, I don't believe you. What can we? Okay, so and that was where you ended. Ski cross is kind of Where
Yeah,
you,
so
you had enough?
I stopped ski cross when I fractured a couple of vertebrae,
Oh my
and
God!
that was sort of where I decided that I was kind of done.
What were you doing to fracture? Well, no
Well, I
doubt.
was racing ski cross, and I was in Arosa in Switzerland, and it was the qualification run. And all these stories, crashing in ski cross makes me sound like I was properly terrible. I wasn't that terrible, but I did a bit of crashing.
You go big or go home, Ed. That's...
Yeah, exactly. It was in the qualification run, and so what you're trying to do over all the terrain is juice the backside of every piece of terrain. So I was juicing that, pressing down the backside of this roll, and it then leads into a kicker. And the light was pretty flat, and I just got my weight slightly wrong. I tried to press down the backside of this roll slightly too long, which then put me onto my heels, and then I went off a kicker with my bum on my bindings, basically, and pretty much did half a backflip. And I landed pretty heavily on the top of my back, sort of base of my neck, which was not most comfortable. But I don't know about you, but whenever I've crashed, and like I say, I've done more than my fair share of crashing. You kind of go through like a mental. I always feel like it's like a sort of mental scan of your entire body, trying to work out if anything's like really bad.
Yes. Yeah.
But my mental scan, I was upside down in a net with one ski on, and so and this poor course worker comes up to me. And he goes, are you okay? Are you okay? And I said, I think so. I'm not sure. Because obviously, like, you're just seconds from after crashing, you're sort of still figuring it out.
Yeah.
And I was like, I just need you to take off my ski. I need you to take off. And he's like, I can't do that. You just landed on your back. I can't touch you. I said, I think I'm okay. I just need you to take off my ski. Can you please just take off my ski? So I managed to convince him to take my ski off, which meant I could turn around and sit on the snow.
Yeah.
And I had a really bad pain in my hip. I'd wrung my head pretty hard. I'd hurt my thumb, and my back was a little bit sore. But I was sort of, I wasn't knocked out. I wasn't, concussed. I didn't think. And so I was just sort of I was just sitting there. And the guy then turns to me and he's like, the doctor's on his way and they're bringing the blood wagon. And I said, there's absolutely no way I'm getting in a blood wagon. You're not putting me in a blood wagon. And so he said, no, but I saw your crash. You should be going down in a blood wagon. I said, well, I'm not going in a blood wagon. And I've touched wood. I've never been in the blood wagon, and I have absolutely no interest in ever going in one of those things because they look like they cause more injuries than they do.
Yeah. They don't use it so much in the World Cup anymore. Everyone goes helicopter now, don't they?
Yeah,
you never see anyone.
Straight chopper. Yeah, but the ski cross isn't the glitz and glamour of Alpine World Cup. It's the lesser sibling. Do you know what I mean? And so telling me the blood wagon was coming. I was probably a couple of 100 meters from the bottom, and so I said, "I'm not doing it." And I put my skis on and I slid gingerly down to the bottom. And I got to the bottom, and my parents had come to watch this race. Poor buggers, and my mum, who's an ex-nurse, a retired nurse, and she goes, "What's going on? You don't look right." And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sore." And she was, "All right, well, we're going down to the medical centre." So I went to the medical centre. The guy said, what's hurting? And I showed him everywhere that was hurting, and I got an X-ray of my neck and my hip. And he said, well, nothing's broken. He said, your neck's a bit wonky, but it could have been wonky from before. So that's it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that was it. I was left the medical centre. I then went back to my hotel limping because I couldn't really walk because my hip was so painful. But I'd driven out, but thankfully I had a friend who was on holiday in a resort around the corner, and he offered to drive me home because I couldn't. There's no way I could have driven home. And so I did that. Got home, went to see a sports doc who then scanned me as opposed to just x-rayed me and told me I had a couple of fractured vertebrae. Oh, wow. And I shouldn't really be moving. And so he said, I hope you've not really been doing too much. And I said, well, I've been on the bike a couple of times, because at this point, like, by the time I'd got the scan, you know how it works. It takes a little while. And so by the time I've been on the static bike a few times, and I said, well, yeah, I've been out on the bike a few times. And he's like, right, well, stop doing that and stop doing anything else, because you've got a couple of healing fractures in your vertebrae. So stop doing everything.
Wow.
And that was basically it. And then I realised that I was, that I didn't want to keep putting myself in these positions, and I stopped competing.
Wow. Well, let this be the podcast where it is known that Ed Drake is the man who skied off, tried to ski off a broken back. That's impressive.
It's all right. But I don't think I would do it again.
No, fair enough. As you can tell, it's had an amazing and an interesting career, and I love sort of hearing the story of kind of what his progression looked like, and I'm always really, really interested to see what the backstory is for all of these high-level skiers and people who have made it to the kind of the top levels. And there's always something in the background that sort of meant that they had really, really good and easy access to skiing facilities, or they had someone in their life that was really, influential for them in terms of their skiing, and so it also proves, with Ed. In this second half, we're going to go on to talk about coaching in general, so being coached and coaching. There's a whole bunch of sort of nuggets to do with the Eurotest, which he does some coaching for as well, and a whole bunch of other stuff, ending with an interesting chat about how to run a yoga studio, for those of you that are interested in that. So enjoy that second half as it comes. It looks like here in Switzerland we're finally easing up from what must have been, it's at least a month of kind of lockdown, as it were. It hasn't snowed here. This has been one of the driest periods on record. It hasn't actually snowed since the week that they shut the lifts. So it's looking and feeling very, very summery, but I think that's the case all over Europe at the moment. But I think Switzerland is sort of gradually easing its way out of this crisis, and I'm very much looking forward to the creche being open. My daughter getting to interact with other kids, and maybe trying out these new golf clubs that I've bought. So enjoy the second half here. I've got another great interview already in the bag, which I've got to edit up, and that will come to you later on in May. That's with a guy called Andy McCann, and for those of you that know Andy will know that there's going to be some absolute gold stuff in there. So enjoy this, and I'll catch you on episode 21. Well, we'll come later to what you're up to these days, but I'm wondering, this podcast is focused on ski instructors, but I know that there's a few recreational skiers kicking around as well that listen to this. But what can those people learn technically from downhill skiers, would you say?
I would say a downhiller or a ski racer in general, but certainly towards the faster end of it, Super G and downhill, I think ability to read terrain is probably second to none. And being able to picture a route and seeing how you're going to get down and reading stuff whilst you're moving. I think that's going fast and sort of working these big turns and these big angles and reading terrain. And I think that's one of the big things that I think skiing fast only when it's safe. Don't need to jump over any rolls and find somebody sitting on the other side of it.
Well, yes, there is that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things, funnily enough, when we're coaching kids for GS, it's one of the little things that I say to them before I put in the gate for the nervous ones. Certainly, I'll be like, well, as a kid, is there anywhere else apart from this place where you can go as fast as you want? Like, there's no one here telling you what to do, so you can choose how fast you go down this racetrack. If you want to go fast, you go fast. Go for it. It's a controlled environment in that way. I think it's a great thing for kids. in terms of the GS racing that they're doing.
Oh yeah.
But the but is that also in terms of the inspection? Because in downhill, right, you get to inspect it. I suppose you get to training race it a couple of times as well, don't you?
Yeah, you get training. You get minimum. So the rules are you have to be able to start one training run before you're allowed to race a World Cup. So you could, if you were mental, push out the start gate, take your skis off, and that would count. But there is minimum one training run before racing a World Cup. So that you do get to obviously ski beforehand. So you get to inspect and ski it and then race it. Whereas Super G, you don't get your training runs, but it's all about, you're going fast. But which is what I quite like the Super G, because I like that sort of. I tended to be able to read course sets quite well, so that was one of the things that I quite enjoyed about Super G, which I think gave me a bit of an edge over quite a few of my competitors. Was that I was able to read terrain and read course sets quite well.
How did you find the reading terrain from in inspection? You're looking, right. You're going pretty slow, you're slipping it or whatever. Like, how do you make that transition in your head between looking at something statically and then imagining what it's going to be like when you're when you're 70 miles an hour or whatever?
Full speed. A lot of it is experience. A lot of it is trial and error when you're young. But also, I think it's the courses are set to be skied on the equipment, so you can obviously the radiuses and stuff that you've got, so you kind of get that ability to like read stuff. But also it's about you can use all the. I used to use it quite a lot in terms of direction over rolls. You'd pick a point on the other side of the valley, or a pylon or something, anything that you can find over the roll to make sure to help that you're directed in the right way. So you've got a gate on a blind roll, so you know roughly where your angle is, where you're supposed to be hitting that, pointing across at the valley on the other side, or making sure you hit that where that banner is or whatever, or the snow fence or whatever. And that sort of little tricks of being able to help make sure that you're pointing where you want to be pointing, because obviously once you go over that roll, when you're doing Super G or downhill, when you're doing those sort of speeds, you haven't got a chance to really make any corrections.
No, for sure. And you see that often, don't you? You see guys like ending up in the net or in the next gate.
Yeah, you only stop two places on a speed race, and it's either in the finish area or in a net. So those are your two options: finish or the nets.
Actually there might be a parallel there. I don't know how far ahead you look when you're racing, but I know that when you're, let's say you're doing a sort of demonstration run of short turns or something, normally you'll pick a fixed, you won't look at the tips of your skis, and it's often something that it's weird. It's something that we see quite often from British ski instructors. It's something that the federation like produces somehow. I don't know why, but they end up looking at their skis all the time. And actually, where you'd want to be looking at, if you're you'd say you're doing a run of shorts or whatever, you'd want to be looking at a sort of a point much more fixed down the hill, rather than kind of just in front of you. And you can't do that in downhill either. You can't be looking a few feet in front of you.
No, I think you sort of scan, don't you? I feel like when you're turning around gates, you've got to look at the key stress points on the course, which is by the gate. So you have a little scan down there to make sure there's no holes, or you're not skiing through some bumps. And most of the time you'll know those are coming anyway, because you'll have course reports from coaches and staff and stuff that over this roll through this section, watch out, there's a couple of bumpy turns that have started to form or whatever, or softer snow, this sort of stuff. So you kind of scan, but you're ultimately looking a long way down the hill. I know what you mean in terms of people looking down at their skis. I think the minute you're caught up with looking at your skis, you kind of I don't know, there's too much going on in your head. I think when you start looking at your skis, you don't need to be, by all means have a scan down if you're looking at where your tips are in terms of correlation from tip to tip or whatever, but ultimately you've got to be I don't know, it's sort of more of autonomy in terms of like what's happening under your feet is happening under your feet, and you need to be concentrating on what's coming towards you as opposed to what you're actually doing.
It's something that the Swiss ski instructors, old bosses, were bemused by this. It's like, why do you British guys always look at your feet? and I think it's just like a habit thing that you get if you haven't been brought up on snow. If you've been brought up on snow ever since ever, you're not really worried about what your skis are doing because
safety net.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, can we move on slightly to the sort of the athlete coach relationship, because I think a lot of our listeners would be interested in this, and we talked a little bit off air about sort of coaching yourself, and I know you do a little bit of it. Initially, I think I'd like to talk to you about your relationship to your coaches as you were as an athlete. And what were can you remember any like standout stuff from an athlete perspective that coaches did for you, or relationships that you had with coaches?
I think I remember most of my coaches, even from when I was young. Mm-hmm. And I think by far the best thing that a coach has ever done to me, but obviously every person learns differently, but was believe in me. And I think that sounds strange because they're about, supposed to be helping you technically, but actually for me, it was the buy-in from a coach to what I was doing, but then obviously ultimately changing what I was doing. But one of my favorite coaches is a guy called Wolfgang Grabner, and I hated him at the same time. Yeah. So he was an Austrian guy, and he was my first coach when I joined the British team. Mm-hmm. And it was his first job in the UK as a British coach away from Austria. Mm-hmm. And he now works for the World Cup women's team for Austria. Okay. And he was brutal, absolutely uncompromising, brutal, fully dictator. It was my way, the highway. You guys aren't good enough. You're not skiing quick enough. You're not doing this right. All of this sort of stuff. And I remember that first year we had him, or the first winter I had him, I hated the guy. Yeah. And and for me, and I think that at the same time, he was learning how we as a team, because at that point there were 5 of us on the team, including myself. Mm-hmm. And it was his first time working with Brits. And he'd come from a background of working with Austrians, where there's a conveyor belt of talent, and if you break a couple on the way, it doesn't really matter because you've got 20 looking to fill these 2 spaces of athletes you've just broken. Yeah. And Britain doesn't have that luxury. Mm-hmm. So I think he changed the way that he taught, in terms of he kind of became a little bit more, I don't know, curvy, less sort of edgy in terms of what he was doing. He sort of became a little bit nicer, if that makes any sense. And at the same time, we became a little bit more hardened to what it was. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, that was my first real experience of that style of coaching. Through most of the coaches that I'd had previously had been, a little bit nicer, isn't fluffy necessarily the right word. I can't think of the right. But in terms, they've been a bit more collaborative and talking about stuff. And actually, I needed that change. But we both from both sides, we learned how to deal with it. And he became that second year. He has become one of my favorite coaches of all time, and a guy that I still speak to through social media, and every so often, if I get out to a World Cup or whatever, when I'm commentating, I can go and speak to him, and we can have a beer and catch up and sort of catch up and reminisce about the good times as well as the shit times. Yeah,
I think that conveyor belt thing is interesting, isn't it? Because I know a bunch of guys that have been, training for things like Eurotest or whatever, and they've been trained by. I think it's cultural. I think they've been trained by, say, French guys, say. And a French guy sometimes, I'm generalising, but I've heard that, you'll ski down and the guy will go, it'll give you some sort of feedback which might be as simple as that was crap, go round again, or it might be something like you need to push more, and that'll be it, and like off you go. And your average, I think, this is what I think, based on the amount of time that I've spent with British guys training me, is that they're a bit more, like you say, they're a bit softer, they're a bit more involved, they're a bit more sort of sensitive to and a bit more kind of willing to go in depth with their explanations.
Yeah, I've done a bit of Eurotest coaching, and it's quite interesting. I've done a bit of coaching, like we said before we came on air. Coaching is not where I see my long-term future, so I do a bit, but I don't do a lot. So I dip in and out of it as and when the right situation comes up. And so I've done a bit of Eurotest coaching, and so it's interesting seeing the difference between the athletes in terms of racing athletes and what have to be athletes in terms of now the guys doing their Eurotest.
Yeah.
And so,
what difference do you see? You're going to have to explain that, because there's going to be all sorts of people going, "Is that me? Is that not me?"
Yeah. The Eurotest candidates are looking for a golden nugget of information that's going to make them quick enough to pass, which, as an athlete, in terms of racing athlete, you're not looking for a golden nugget. You're looking for a very small incremental improvement in terms of getting to where you want to be. And I think the reason that Eurotest stuff, I think, from my personal opinion, is that the reason that a lot of people struggle with it, or are craving attention on every single run about every single turn, is the fact that they feel like they're looking for one nugget that is going to make the difference between them being too slow and being fast enough. Yeah. And in reality, it takes such a long time to make changes, and it's brutal when it means so much, because it's people's livelihoods, it's people's cold hard cash that they're putting on the line to try and pass the Eurotest. And so you really understand them trying to get every single piece of information, but ultimately a lot of it is about time, and the fact that anybody going for the Eurotest is trying to do it in a quicker time as possible means that they crave information at every turn, where actually you can't. That's not how you improve. You need to just go and do and make changes. You can't just make changes because of the nature of ski racing, with every turn being different, every section being different. It means that you can't just ski one way. You have to be adaptable, which means that it's not one piece of information that's going to be your ticket. It's a whole load of building blocks that make you quick enough to pass, and that unfortunately takes time and therefore costs money.
Well, I think the racer instinctively understands that as well, doesn't he? That he understands that it's just a question of graft and time, because he's in ski club, or let's say you've got a little Grom who kind of joined ski club at age 6 or whatever, and he just that's his life then for quite a long time. Wednesday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday, racing gates, snapping plastic. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen it from any of the people that I know that have gone through their Basie from a racing standpoint. I feel like racers, and I don't know sure if this is 100% true or not, because I only see it from a racer standpoint because that's who I was. But I feel like the collective of people going through the Basie system or the IASI system, whichever system you're going through, but basically that system sees racers as, when they get their exemptions from this, that and the other, they see it as a shortcut. But in reality, any racer that goes through any of this stuff has pumped in, 5, 6, 7 times the amount of hours that anybody else has put in on snow. And that's why, for me, racers, it's good that racers do get exemptions from some stuff, because it's just the nature of it. Your Eurotest stuff, that I don't have to pass my Eurotest because I skied to a low enough point and now I open for Eurotest anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a gimme because I was quick at ski racing. That's a gimme because I have skied for 25 years of trying to go fast.
Yeah, exactly. And also, well, in addition, when you go up on the glaciers in the summer, right, and you see all these little racer groms they're doing their thing, and some of them are really young, they're skiing around with those massive bags. That's always one of the funniest things that you see.
That they could fit in.
Yeah. And then they're skiing around, they carry all their own gear, struggling along with 2 pairs of skis. And then when the course condition, if it's too soft, they're out skiing moguls, they're making rut lines, they're doing this, that, and the other. It's no wonder that, if they pop out of their system and then go and decide to do whatever, be it CSIA, PSIA, BASI, whatever, it's no wonder they come with an accomplished set of skills.
Absolutely.
Like we had last year a girl come work for us, Annabelle, who used to race Ski Valet, quite a decent level. Hi Annabelle, if you're listening. Amazing skier. Just turned up, anything you asked her to do, she could do. And all she wanted to do was come and, do some work on weekends and stuff like that. But because she'd had that grounding, she's the best skier by miles of any of us.
I think, the whole Eurotest stuff, I take my hat off to these guys that are going for the Eurotest and passing the Eurotest that don't come from a racing background, because the level is tough.
Yeah.
It's a good level, and it's one of the reasons why instructors get to be paid well, is because it's a tough level. Not everybody can do it. So at the same time as it being a massive thorn in people's sides, it's also, part of a golden ticket if that's what you want to do.
It's worth it. Yeah.
So I feel like, but it's a serious level, and you have to be dedicated. You have to become an athlete, and you have to, be able to tune your stuff properly. It's like really good for dedication. It's really good for adaptability. I think it's a serious level, and I take my hat off to people that do that and manage to pass it, who don't come from a racing background, because it's a serious skill.
What about, I'm going to jump back onto a different, well, not a different, the same topic, but jump you back a little bit. So in terms of coaching, like, you're around the World Cup circuit a fair bit. You're not always in a studio commentating on these things. Sometimes you're there. And what do you see, or when you were around the circuit at the highest levels, what are the relationships between the coaches and the athletes look like? Because they're often one-to-one then, aren't they?
Yeah-ish. I mean, it depends. You've obviously got the bigger teams have big coaching staff, the big coaching team. So, yeah, the athlete-coach ratio is pretty good. But it's, I don't know, it's weird because it's a family as well as a working environment, as well as a sporting working environment. So I think the coach-athlete ratio, I think there's a lot of respect that goes both ways. And because you're, as an athlete, you're putting we talk about risking your life. You're putting your life in the hands of the coaches and of the ability of those around you. When you're talking about lines, when you're talking about ski technique, when you're talking about tactics for a certain section, you're putting your life in somebody else's hands. So it's a close relationship. And the coaches live and breathe every turn, and I do it from a lower level in terms of the little bits of coaching that I do. I live and breathe every turn with anybody that I'm coaching, from Eurotest to kids racing.
Okay. Cool. So what I was going to say to you next. What I wanted to touch on before we kind of touch into kind of what you're up to next or these days was from a technical standpoint. So let's say you're opening a Eurotest. Although you said to me you don't like turning anymore, there's 50 gates on there. That's
about 49 too many.
And you're strapping on some relatively short boards. What do you have a technical focus that you think about either when you're warming up for that or when you're in the gates? Like, we had an episode like 2 or 3 episodes ago from a guy who coaches under I think it's under 14 in Sun Valley in the US, and his thing was all about trying to be on top of the boot at the top of the turn. And I've heard you talk about that on the podcast before, about he who stays on top of the boot the longest wins, that kind of stuff. And did you have that kind of personal focus in your own skiing with regards to racing?
One of my breakthrough moments, and I think lots of skiers, for recreational skiers to World Cup skiers, will have a sort of an epiphany moment where you just get something and it makes a huge difference. And for some people, it's going to be whatever, leaning further forward is going to be skiing with one hand above their head, makes a better turn on their left foot, whatever. And mine was, I always struggled with flexing my ankles, and so a lot of times, like you say, I talk about skiing with a closed ankle, and for me that's just about making sure that ankle angle is far enough forward in terms of if you look at it as a snapshot from a side-on picture, you've got your knees in front of your toes and your shoulders in front of your knees. So you're skiing with this sort of back angle, sort of lean forward angle. And that was what I was trying to do. But my actual moment that sort of changed the way I skied was I started, and I still do it today, every single time I put skis on, but now I do it without thinking about it. I tiptoe in my transitions inside my boot.
Okay.
So
you actively are you talking about actively kind of pulling the skis back underneath you in effect?
No, so I literally try to tiptoe in my ski boots. So
now let's say you're in a snug 150 flex pair of Atomics.
Yeah.
So that's not you're not actually physically going to be able to do that because you won't have any upward movement in your ankle.
No, but what it does do is if by tiptoeing, so the thing why, and whenever I do any sort of coaching, I always talk about this because because it had such a huge effect on my skiing, I try to inflict it on everybody else when I'm coaching.
I think we all do that to a certain extent.
For some people, they like it. For some people, I'm sure they just rather take their boots off and throw them at me. Yeah. But for me, what it does is it forces you into a good position without you realising it. And for me, the coaching that I do, that's what I try to do. I try to trick people into being in the right position by doing stuff that they know how to do. So if you're in a slightly back position, your backside slightly too low, which a lot of us get into very easily. But if your weight's a little back and you stand, you could do it in your trainers. You can stand there with your, in a sort of ski position with your butt a bit too far back, and you're told to tiptoe. You naturally bring your backside forward, and you bring everything forward, and you come into this great angulated position with your shoulders in front of your knees and your knees in front of your toes because you're into this tiptoe position. And so that was something that made such a big difference to me because my transitions became better. It meant that the start of my turn, which is the most important part of any turn, is that initiation phase. And so by bringing my hips through and getting better positioning in my transition, it meant that I could then flex my ankles from a better position, an easier position to be able to flex the boot. And therefore my pickup was so much more powerful and so much more stable from the get-go. And therefore, as a knock-on effect, as everything does within skiing, it meant that my release phase of my turn was way cleaner because I'd done hard work earlier in the turn. And so that was something that I found I got so much of a good feeling from, and that's what I try and one of the things I try trick people into being better at their transitions. And I think transitions are such an easy part of the turn to make changes because there is minimal force. And so why wouldn't you make a big effort in a part of the turn where not much is coming back towards you? There's not a lot of feedback going through the feet. It's not like you're trying to make changes in a turn. You're trying to basically put yourself in the best position to start your turn when it's at its easiest to get into that good position.
Yeah.
If you see what I'm
no, I do see what you mean, and there is no coincidence. In a lot of the race coaches all talk about the same thing, right? It's being in a good place at the top of the turn, and I think that relates into recreational skiing as 100%. Well. And I often talk not on such a, maybe not in such an extreme way, but the early season sessions that I always do with my clients are always sort of transition balanced related, because the habit at the start of the season is to rush that area. You rush that area and you wash the tail of the ski, and you then arrive in a big pressure dump at the end of the turn.
Yeah.
Now your recreational skier is using the ski in a different way to the way that you would be, because you're trying to generate speed out of the turn.
Yeah, but also you're trying to, and that's the thing when I talk to, because I do a bit of coaching to adults who aren't necessarily wanting to go faster, but for me it's efficient, and I'm all about efficiency. All about efficiency. And so by being in a better position at the start of the turn means you don't have to work as hard in the turn. So for me it was about going faster, but ultimately it means that you can ski for longer because you're not fighting. Look how hard it is to stand in a squat position for 2 minutes than it is to stand in a more forward ski related position. It's black and white. It's not necessarily, that's the sort of correlation I try to show people when I'm working with skiers as opposed to racers, that yes, I came at it from a speed perspective, but ultimately it's applicable in terms of energy saving positions.
Well, if there's any of my existing clients listening, they'll probably just say, "Oh, you sound exactly like what Dave says at the start of the season," which is exactly that. Why would you add in any undue effort into your skiing if you don't need to do it? If you get your balance point right at the top of the turn, the ski works all the way around the curve. It's just physics, right? That less pressure will arrive at the end of the turn. Therefore, it's going to be easier to ski, and you're going to be just cruising around the mountain in a better way than you would be trying to fight the mountain all the time.
Yeah, you take your small wins, and by moving properly in a point of the turn where the least forces are acting on you, it just means the rest of the turn's way easier, right? So yeah.
No, I'm with you on that one. One of the other ones that I think is quite important, and it probably applies actually to racers in addition, one thing that really worked for me, or has an understanding that has worked for me, is the amount that you steer the ski, whether you're in a calf situation or a skidding situation, is the amount. I suppose you could almost talk about it as like a finishing off of the turn. A lot of people don't finish off the turns enough, but it's a sort of, for me, it looks a little bit like, if you were to look down, which I'm trying not to do, would be that your skis are still continuing along their arc as you're going across them and trying to balance above them.
And I think I totally agree. And I found myself quite frustrated. It'll be interesting to hear what you think, and actually potentially interesting to hear what the listeners think, depending on how abusive they are. But I find myself talking a lot to skiers that I teach about where they're facing in terms of their body positioning. And in terms of finishing off your turn, like you just talked about there, so you have to, and I'm a huge believer in it, and of facing where you're going. And this if you're doing slalom turns, short radius, very short, snappy turns, then you face the bottom of the hill. But the minute you turn anything more across the hill, you have to face where you're going, because the traverse section is important, but also if you are facing the bottom of the hill, and you guys at home listening can stand up and try this. Imagine you're in a traverse section of the turn to the bottom of your whatever wall you're facing. So if you're facing where your skis are going, how easy it is to move your knees. But if you start to try and twist your body to be facing down the hill whilst your feet are facing across the hill, how difficult it is to actually move your knees and move your body to weight to the inside. You end up blocking yourself massively by trying to square yourself to the bottom of the hill, because you become in this big split. Your inside foot is further forward. Your outside foot gets blocked by your inside leg. And all you can then do is drop the hip massively, and you just become a passenger around the turn as opposed to be able to impart force into the ski. So by people getting away from this old school style of skiing, which is facing bottom of the hill, where you used to have to really muscle the heel to come around. Thanks to carving skis, we don't have to muscle the heel to come round anymore. You could, if you want to, you can fully arc it and it'll come round. But if you want to bring in some rotation, then the ski comes around much easier than it used to anyway, because of the length of the thing. And so by following where you're going, you free up knee movement, you free up hip movement. And I think that whole finishing off the turn, like you were talking about earlier, is so much easier through that traverse section if you don't get caught up with trying to keep your chest facing towards the bottom of the hill.
I don't think anyone does that in a longer turn anymore, do they? I suppose you might see that with some people that grew up on a sort of longer, older, straight ski. But a modern ski,
I see a lot of people still, when I'm talking about it to adults, maybe it's less kids, but talking about it to adults, a lot of people I find are still, I was told to be facing the bottom of the hill. And then they're like,
maybe in 1970.
Yeah, I think, exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot of people still, listen to or think back to when they were taught. And I guess maybe that's a case of, some people being taught how to do something, then coming away from lessons and then coming back to where the coaching or instructing or whatever, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute, everything's changed. But I think that's a really important message to people. That's one of my huge bugbears is that sort of facing the bottom of the hill anymore.
Yeah,
it just creates so many issues.
Oh, it certainly does, and especially with essentially parabolic skis or whatever, carved skis or curved edge skis, you can't really afford to be anything other than square to the ski, right? In transition, after whatever you do after that. After transition, as you kind of regain your balance, now you can use kind of positive rotation into the turn if you want. You can use a counter rotation depending on what you're trying to do. But at point of transition, everything does seem to work better if you're square to the ski. That's for sure.
Yes.
I'm in. We agree. Okay, cool. Let's finish it. Well, I'm conscious I've got you on the phone for ages, and I can smell my dinner coming up the stairs. No, I can't go anyway. I've got a daughter to put to bed at some point. But what are you up to these days then? So you said that you do a bit of coaching now and then, but I see you much more as Ed Drake, the media guy, John Fellow's natural successor. But where what are you up to these days?
Also, I sort of, I don't know, it took me a while to find my feet post racing, but the media side of stuff I really enjoy, with doing the commentary with Nick and did a bit of stuff for the BBC for the last Olympics and the podcast, and I like the fit of, I'm hugely passionate about skiing and racing specifically, I guess, but and so the media stuff kind of fit really nicely. But at the same time, it's hard because obviously that's only a winter gig, right?
Yeah, well,
so
yes.
I've been working hard to try and push outside my winter sport niche when it comes to my commentating. So I've done a bit of stuff for athletics, and that sort of stuff. So that's sort of what I'm trying to do, but also. with alongside a little bit of coaching I do, my wife owns a yoga studio.
Oh, wow.
So general dog's body for that. Just odds and sods with the studio.
Oh, so that's cool. That's really good. How is the yoga business? I mean, there's a lot of competition in that world.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's like, I guess it's a little bit like instructing. It's if you are good or you've got good staff, then people will find you. I think there's a lot of people in the yoga world, not that I'm a teacher, but I get to see quite a lot of it. There's a lot of jokers out there who have done minimal training and all of a sudden pitch themselves as some sort of guru, and it's about trying to make sure that you don't get sort of caught up in people that aren't as good as they sort of appear to be. There's a lot of, I think that's the thing with social media. You can get a bit of a false sense of how good somebody is at something based on what you get to see on social media.
Yes.
And so and I think thankfully for skiing, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the fact that it's quite strict in terms of your qualifications to your teaching, whereas I think yoga is a little bit further behind that in terms of, yes, there are some qualifications, but it's not quite as strict in terms of, the amount of hours you need to teach before you can go to be qualified, and the amount of hours of qualification. You can do 1,000-hour qualifications, you could do 200-hour qualifications, and you're essentially allowed to teach the same people. And so that's a sort of tricky area. But I think I guess skiing, from my side on the external, because like I said, I don't really do an awful lot of teaching, that it seems that it's a slightly more regulated industry.
Yeah, there is, and I think the quality will shines through in the end anyway.
Yes.
We have a fairly decent reputation amongst our particular client niche. I'd like to think, and if you stick at that long enough, you build yourself a nice reputation. That's one of the ways of doing it. You stick at anything for long enough, and you're there. It's kind of how you take it on, and how you, as long as you don't lose the core value that made you good in the first place, I think is the key.
I think it's a hard balance, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and that's kind of in terms of our own the ski school here is I'm sort of struggling. Not struggling really. It's actually gone really well this year, but it's like, how do you take a ski school that was all essentially about Dave Burrows and his local reputation, and then take it to become less about you? How do you do that? How do you manage that transition? And I imagine your wife would have the same thing, right?
That's the ultimate when you're trying to build something, because there's only one of you.
There's only so many hours in the day, right? So if all you do is sell your time for money, you're limiting yourself in essence.
But I think it's all about trying to find the right people, being a good people reader, and trying to find somebody that has the same values as you in terms of, and I think that's, we see that in the yoga business and anything like that. And I'm sure loads of listeners will know that in terms when they're starting to run teams, or when they run, groups of people that you can only do so much. But I was about to say, I was going to tell a story about this lady who started the Huffington Post, and I can't remember the exact words she said, so I'll try and willy it, but it was a really interesting article. She was on a podcast a few months ago, and it was saying something like, don't get caught up in thinking that nobody can do it as good as you. People won't do it like you, but people can do it as good as you. And being able to read and being able to see the difference between doing it as well as you, but in a different way, and not doing it necessarily the way that you think it should be done. Yeah. And actually, I think that was that and something that stuck with me, because I think it's very true. Like, I often, you often go around thinking, whether it's yoga or the media stuff, that no one's doing it like you do it. But that doesn't mean that the way that they're doing it isn't as good.
No, that's right, and I think that's why it's important to find your niche. You find your own little client group and your own niche, and you work out what it is that you're good at, and then you just, to a certain extent, you just stay in your lane. I'm not particularly interested in, or indeed am capable of, let's say, competing against someone like James Bennett with regards to race coaching. because it's just not what I'm good at, and it's not what I have got experience in. But I do know what I am good at, and that's the market that I will go after. And it might be, you know, that you have exactly the same with the yoga studio as well, you know. Yeah. All right. So what's the future for the podcast next year? I'm presumably there's going to be a whole bunch of summer content as well. I'm looking forward to that.
I mean, the summer stuff's, well, actually, the Corona stuff has actually made it a little easier to get hold of athletes.
It has, isn't it?
Nobody's around.
Yeah.
Everybody's around. Nobody's away doing stuff. So, and I think most people are going, yeah, actually, I'd quite like to come and do some chatting because I've got nothing else to do.
Well, I don't want to say that's why you're here, Ed, but, you know.
Never. No, but it's, so the podcast, we're going into our third season now. It's just trying to grow it. And because it's, you know, and I'm sure you'll find the exact same sort of things. Because it's growing organically, it means that it just takes a little bit of time. But I like the fact that it's my baby and I can direct it where I want.
Yes.
But it's, I don't know, I'd like to see it take off a little bit more in terms of because what we do is this on the ski racing side is fairly unique in terms of a podcast perspective. It means that we're fairly global. So, and it's like 38% of listeners are from America. Yeah. Which is quite fun. So so that's that side of things, and commentary got to keep going, and it's got world champs next season and the Olympics the season after. So before you know, it's going to be hectic schedules. I just hope that we get to do a bit of summer skiing before this is all.
Well, I hope so. And, you know, as soon as that Sassfay Glacier opens, I'm going to be there. I'm skis waxed, ready to go, because I'm just desperate to ski, you know.
And that's funny. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Finished too early. Yeah. Although back here, I don't know what it's like out there. Back here, it's been like 25 degrees the last few days. So it definitely doesn't feel like it's the spring. It feels like midsummer.
Well, you know what's going to happen, though, and I'll predict this for anyone now, is that you wait, and we'll all get released from this imposed house arrest in May, start of May, and it will just piss down for May. The whole month. I guarantee.
I hope not. Everyone, actually, to be honest, I don't think anybody will care. I think everybody will be out playing football in the rain.
Yeah. It'll just be
singing in the rain.
Stir crazy.
In pub gardens in the rain.
Yeah, it's true. Right, so Ed, plug yourself for corporate sponsorship, speaking gigs, anything else that you want to do. Where can people find you?
Well, social media, really. Just on Twitter, Instagram, Ed Drake on both of those. Managed to get that on that train early.
That was great. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's come and find me. But thanks very much for having me. It's been great to chat.
It's been fantastic. I'm really, really pleased we had this chance to chat, and thank you so much. Really, really cool. And it's a pleasure to have you on. Love your podcast, and I heartily recommend that everyone listens to it.
Thank you. Well, keep up the good work and stay healthy.
All right. Thanks, buddy. I'll see you soon.
All right. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.